just only for this fight. For every fight that I have, I think a lot about this quote that I heard from Nick Diaz many years ago. He said, if you don't finish a fight, you lose a fight. And all the fights that I've won, all finishes. And so I'm always trying to get the finish. It's not so much that I want to get the win under my belt or I want it to be an impressive fight. For myself, I like to know that I won the fight. And by winning a fight, in my mind, it's only by finishing the fight.
First of all, introducing our challenger. Out of the blue corner. He's going to step in and he does. It's all over. Let's bring on the boom.
This is Eternal MMA.
All right, everyone, welcome back and thank you for joining us here once again on Eternal Insiders. We are powered by Fight HQ, the official uniform partner for Eternal MMA. And with that, let us welcome in today's guest. He is set to feature on the main card of Eternal 92 when he takes on Alfred Stoddart. Please join me in welcoming in City Kickboxing's very own Cam Rowston here on the show for the very first time to talk about that upcoming fight and everything else in between. Mate, thanks for joining me here. Few short weeks away from the fight, man. We're getting pretty close. How are things trending with you ahead of this big one, brother?
Everything's chugging along. It's moving through smoothly. Just basically straight from the last fight into this one, straight into camp, trained straight through Christmas and New Year's, like it was just another normal day.
No rest for the wicked, brother. I mean, yeah, it's a quick turnaround, but I mean, you finished your 2024 with a couple of wins, man. Speaking of Christmas, nice way to cap off the year. Must have made your Christmas and your New Year just a bit more enjoyable to take a couple of wins into that end of the year.
Yeah, it's always enjoyable, you know, those few days after a win. But I don't get too high on the highs, you know, just ride them as they come, and then look for what's next.
So you obviously had the fight against Blair Bratag at Eternal 91. You got the win by submission. Very emotional. Were you pretty much just straight back into the gym, just like training straight away? Like, I know it's sort of the end of the year and everything, but was your sort of mentality like, hey, let's just kind of keep this train rolling? Like, there's no stop for you at all at that point?
Yeah. I came out of that pretty unscathed. I took like 2 or 3 days off. Then I was just back into the gym straight away. A few of the boys had fights lined up for early Feb, like Izzy's fighting Imavov, and we had Khan Olifi was getting ready for a fight, so those boys needed bodies. So I was back there in the gym with them.
Now, a lot of our fans, you know, both here and internationally, already be very familiar with you. Of course, you competed mid-2024 on Dana White's Contender Series in search of a contract. Obviously, unfortunately for yourself, that didn't go your way. But like we said, you bounced back at the end of the year to get yourself a couple of wins to close out the year. First of all, like how much time did it sort of take you to process, or how did you process sort of that missed opportunity? It only took you a couple of months to get straight back into action. Was the sort of the game plan in the immediate aftermath to just keep going with the fights, like stay active as much as possible and just sort of keep the train rolling and try to get that call back to the UFC?
Yeah, that was pretty much it. Like, stay as active as possible, and hopefully they come back, they come calling again, or they come knocking. I spoke to Eugene and my manager, and they said, hey, it's you know, your stocks didn't really go down in that one. Like, there was, compared to the other 2 fights that Torres had on the Contenders, he blew both those guys out of the water, and I feel like we had a pretty close fight. Like, he definitely won that, but it was still pretty back and forth. So I knew, like, I had a good look in for the UFC. I'm in the system there. You know, if anything short notice comes up, I'd be ready to go. And based on the history of Contender Series, like, guys who have lost and then gotten signed by the UFC, they're guys who were banged out 2, 3, 4 fights after their Contender Series losses, and then the UFC has come knocking and asked them to step up on like short notice or something like that.
And now, just trying to sort of get a bit of insight into your mentality. I mean, you know, coming into this Contender Series fight, obviously in your mind, you're going into the Contender Series fight, getting yourself a contract with the UFC. That doesn't happen. How challenging was it, I guess, to kind of switch gears, come back home and to compete? And not only that, but compete against a guy like Blair Bratag, you know, a very dangerous up-and-coming middleweight in his own right, a man that had knocked out all 3 of his wins inside half a round, a man being talked about as a potential future middleweight title challenger here in Eternal MMA with his own potential international prospects on the horizon. Not someone you'd take lightly, to say the least. How challenging was that to sort of come back and face a guy like Brett?
Yeah, it was when that fight got signed, I was like, oh, this is a tough fight. So it was like I'm not going to name any names, but like guys who have lost on Contender Series, some of the fights that they've pumped out after that, it's just like, okay, like maybe you fought a guy who was like 2 weight divisions below you, but that's all good. But I mean, like just straight back into the fire, pick a hard fight and just know that, just back yourself and know that you can still do it. That's I think that was the biggest thing. Like so when Blair's name came across, that was me and the coaches and some of the training partners were just like, oh yeah, you gotta back yourself. This is a hard fight. You had a hard fight on Contender Series. You're there. Let's test you again and make sure that you're still there. So that was pretty much the mindset going in.
I mean, if you look at it from that point of view, you talk about guys that are potentially coming back and fighting dudes that are maybe a couple of weight classes below. I mean, Blair's got himself a fight now booked at a weight class above. So like Blair's a big middleweight and now he's going up to fight at light heavyweight in his next fight. But just, focusing a little bit more on that fight that you had against Blair at Eternal 91. Seemed like the strategy for that one was to take him to the ground, drag him into the deep waters, hunt the submissions at every turn. You let a lot of your head movement do the talking on the feet, reading a lot of his strikes, seemingly with ease. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this seemed like a fairly cut and dry sort of simple game plan that you and the team had sort of devised and had a lot of confidence in based on what you knew Brett sort of brings to the table. Blair Bretag, my apologies, not Brett. Keep getting confused that name. I'll let you continue.
Brett's still a good name as well, but Blair's a good name.
Brett, Blair Bretag. We've been down this road before.
Funny, one of the people that actually trained in my kickboxing class, when they saw that fight poster come out, they're like, oh, she was like, oh, Blair's a pretty handsome man. I was like, all right, relax.
What a shout.
Yeah. But the game plan that I had, that was actually plan B. Plan A was to stand on the feet and just basically have a kickboxing fight with him and just mix in a few takedowns here and there, but really just strike with him. But when we had the weigh-ins, I was walking out of the weigh-ins and I saw the cage. I was like, oh, I'll quickly jump in the cage. I got in there. I'm like, fuck, this thing is fucking tiny. Like my kitchen's bigger than this. And I took like 2-3 steps back and I was already on the back. My back was already on the cage. I'm like, this isn't going to work if I'm just going to like move back and shift and like try and do all the fucking stuff where you feint and low kick, blah, 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 all that crap. So I was like, nah, it's just...
So
this is too small to do.
You got to like kind of shift game plans in that immediate kind of moment in the cage where you just like you've got seconds before they announce your kind of your names and the fight and everything. You just like I got to switch the game plan here just based on the size of the cage.
Yeah. We had like me and Brogan Anderson, who's helped me a lot with my grappling. We'd done some stuff for like takedowns and all that, but we hadn't focused as much on that as I had for the striking. But yeah, I just. Before the referee was like, looked at me, he's like, you ready? And then he looked at Blair and he was like, you ready? I looked at Blair and his eyes were like beaming like fucking like possums. And I was like, fuck this. We're just not. There's no shift, move back, feint. Nah, we're just going to go like this. Yeah. So I just met him in the middle and thought that was the easiest path to victory.
Interesting dynamics based on the sort of the size of the cage. And I recall that sort of being talked about if you think about like the Apex cage always being talked about as sort of was that bigger or smaller, the Apex one? Either way, I think that was sort of the smaller one that kind of favors sort of more the wrestling and that sort of thing. So it's very interesting to sort of think about. But yeah, ultimately you did come out with the win via submission. There was some interesting moments in the fight. One of which Blair, my God, you were doing it there before as well. Now you're throwing me off. God, he's going to have words.
That was you started it.
I know, but you got the second one. We're going to continue this train rolling. Blair Bretag throws a soccer kick at you, I think, during the second round. Now, you're on all fours at one point. It looked like he kind of went to throw one. He sort of feigned it a little bit. You're bobbing and weaving sort of on the ground on all fours with the head movement. I imagine maybe you're thinking some shovel punches might be coming your way, but I'm assuming that you weren't expecting a bit of a soccer kick coming your way. Did that hurt? Did that do any significant damage in that time?
No, it didn't rock me or anything. I knew at that point in the fight, like it was quite frantic, but it's if I let it settle down a little bit, he'd kind of get his wits back. He would get his his range or his eyes back on. because the pace was quite high, and that can kind of throw off your eyes and your range and your timing. So I knew if I gave him that break to get his eyes back, it would probably not end too well. Like he would be able to start landing some more strikes. So as soon as it's like I wasn't rocked or anything, I got up and I was like, nah, let's keep going. But obviously the referee had to give him a little bit of a warning, and then we're just straight back into it.
It ended up being a formality because, like we said, finished the fight with the submission. Talk us through that one, because it looked like at one point, especially from the camera's vantage point, my vantage point, even cage side, it looked like Brett's. God, I keep doing this. We have to stop the podcast. We have to call Blair and apologize.
Brett tag. We'll just call him Brett tag.
We're stuck in this loop from now on. If I say it from now on, I'm just going to put a caption over the screen apologizing. Yeah. You got Blair in a position where you've got him in the submission position on the ground. Looks like his head's sort of getting off to the side a little bit, somewhere that might potentially be a safer position for the guy in the rear naked choke. But you finish it still with his head off to the side like that. Not everyone is finishing that submission from that position. Obviously speaks volumes to your technique and the power that you have in that squeeze. Did you sort of just know that in that moment, no matter kind of the head position that he had, that this was the end? How confident were you in that finish at that time?
Yeah, I was pretty confident. I could feel probably about 90% of my arm was underneath his chin, and he was actually moving his head towards my forearm, and I was like, well, if he's going to do that, I'm either going to crank his chin, and he's just going to have his neck cranked, or his chin will eventually just slip over the top of my forearm like this, and the latter happened. So I knew one of those was going to happen.
You get the win. Obviously, a lot of emotions in the win after that. You immediately go over to the guys in the commentary booth. You're calling for Dana, you're calling for Mick and Sean, calling for the UFC at large. You know the Sydney card is coming up for the UFC. You want in on that. Obviously, we don't get that fight in the UFC, but we get the next best thing. We get Eternal MMA on the eve of the UFC. Not too many better places, I guess, to showcase your talents again to the UFC on the eve of having them here in the same city. It's a very good spot to be in. Was it at least your personal plan that if you couldn't immediately slot into that card in the UFC, that Eternal MMA with another opponent was sort of the next non-negotiable?
Yeah. You basically read my mind of like what my plan was for after that fight. I feel like the UFC kind of filled the cards out like pretty far out, and then they start announcing them like only a few weeks out from the fight show, blah blah blah. But I spoke to my manager, and then it was a little bit like this. So then I was like, well, like I just can't wait. I don't want to wait. And then Alfred, a week after I'd fought Blair, Alfred had fought my teammate John, and he got that one over John. And I was like, right, I got to get this one back for the team. I messaged Eternal messaged Alfred, and then we met in the middle, and we're good to go. And here we are.
Here we are, Alfred Stoddart, 4-3 as a pro in his own right. Like you said, coming off a win against your teammate at City Kickboxing and John Varkey. Another middleweight looking to make waves in his own right. The man has been in some wars. He's had a couple of finishes in the first round. He's been finished in the first round. He's been in some grueling decisions, a couple of big fights. How different of a challenge is Alfred compared to a guy like Blair Bratag in your mind?
Completely different stance. He's a southpaw. It's just like I feel like those can be a lot more of a. It can make it a lot more of a 50-50 fight, especially if you're the guy who's orthodox, not being prepared. Like southpaws, they spend 80% of their training time and fucking 80% of their fights fighting orthodox fighters, whereas an orthodox fighter will spend 20% of their time training with southpaws. So you might not be as prepared. You don't see things coming. Your defense isn't as inbuilt as it is, and your reactions aren't as inbuilt as they are when you fight a southpaw. So you've got to be on. So he, I think, just going in against someone like him, you got to be a lot more prepared and make sure that all your strategies are down. Like you've got them pat down. You don't have fighting an orthodox fighter like Blair, you spend your whole career, your whole training time just doing the same moves over and over again. So they're just inbuilt into you. But you got to think a little bit more with someone like Stoddart.
I have to imagine no better place to train, though, at the world's greatest striking gym in City Kickboxing to train you for a southpaw. I know for your last camp, You split your time between City Kickboxing and going over training with guys like the Hickman brothers at Bang Tower. But, training at City Kickboxing, as we just mentioned, training with some of the greatest strikers in the world, training under one of the greatest coaches in the world, in Eugene Berriman, just all the minds that you have there, guys that I know you've helped prepare for fights like Israel Adesanya. I mean, everyone knows the guys there, Dan Hooker, Carlos Ulberg, like just so an absolute wealth of knowledge. Again, not really probably anywhere better in the world to be able to train for a specific stylistic matchup on the feet. You obviously moved from Sydney some time ago to go train at City Kickboxing. How vital has that gym been to you for your growth? And what's sort of been the biggest thing for you? What's sort of been the most important thing for you in terms of being able to train at that gym as they help further your career?
Yeah, well, moving to City Kickboxing has been essential. Like, I don't think I would have gotten this far without them. If I stayed in Sydney, I'm not sure if I'd still be doing this sport. Who knows? Maybe I would have finished a while ago if I stayed in Sydney. But moving over to City Kickboxing has just expanded my view on everything, and it broadened my horizon, my mindset on how to train, how to be more of a professional, how I approach the sport, how I watch the sport, how I train for the sport, everything. So yeah, I owe a lot to the move and the team over here at City Kickboxing.
We just mentioned Sydney. You originally being from Sydney and then coming over to City Kickboxing and living in Auckland, New Zealand. This fight, now you're coming back over to fight in Sydney. Does it feel a little bit like, obviously you are coming home, but does it feel like coming home? Are there any sentimental feelings for you coming back and fighting in Sydney? Are you expecting a bit of hometown support?
Yeah. This is the real main event. Let's be honest. Two boys from Sydney. I'm from Sydney. Stoddart from Sydney. I've got friends that I used to go to high school with that I haven't heard from in 9-10 years, and they're messaging me saying they want to come watch me fight. So it's like, whoa, I haven't heard from you for a while. You want to come watch me fight? Sweet. I've got, my mum's going to come watch me fight. She never comes and watches me fight. So yeah, we're gonna everyone in there who's coming to the Rosehill Racecourse to watch they're coming to watch Stoddart, and they're coming to watch Rowston.
When you say your mum, you just referenced there, doesn't really often get to see you fight. It's her first time seeing you compete, or just hasn't seen you fight much?
She refused to watch me fight for the longest time.
Yeah.
My brother and my dad would come over and watch. I have a younger sister, and my mum, the Blair fight was the first fight that they came and watched live, and that was fight number 13.
Yeah, right.
So they've missed the first 12. They've jumped on the bandwagon right at the end, and lucky for them, I'll let them stay on the bandwagon. But yeah, this is the second fight they're going to watch live.
I've talked to different fighters that have had the same thing, that their mums they can't bear to watch their baby boy fight or their baby girl fight. I totally get it. Just on that point, was that something? I'm loving this mug, by the way. You got to ship me over one of these bad boys. I'm not too far away, mate. By the way, I'm just across the pond. If you got a couple spare, I want one in. Let's go.
Is this a screenshot? The thumbnail?
That's the thumbnail right there. Hold it nice and still, and I'll get that clipped, and we're getting that on the thumbnail. I love it. Let's go, baby. Let's go. 2024, 2025.
I need to be reverse. 2025.
That's the one, baby.
He's coming in soon.
A
few days.
We can make some edits. We can make something happen, man. I like it. Very nice. But just go back to talking about mum there. In terms, does that make you sad, upset, anything like that? Do you understand that she's never been able to kind of come to your fights? It's kind of like that mother's intuition. They don't want to see their son sort of get hurt. Is that something you kind of understood, I guess, the fact that she never come to watch your fights?
Yeah. I think for my first few amateur fights, when I was kind of unsure of how the sport was going to go, or how to defend myself or hold myself properly. And I was I don't know if I actually want mum to come and watch this. I don't even know the guy I'm fighting. I just know we're fighting at 84 kilos. That's about it. But now as she's seen me get a little bit more experience and stuff like that, and she watches the replays and stuff. But now that she's seen it a little bit more, she wants to come and watch, which is good. But I understood at the start that she wasn't too keen on watching her son possibly get absolutely drilled.
That's fair. I mean, shout out to mum. She knows you're coming to the top now, and you've got the skills. You're at the right gym to be able to protect yourself. So we've got mum on board. Happy days to see that she's coming over to watch you get the job done in Sydney. Now, on this Sydney card, I'm assuming, obviously, based on the road that you've traveled so far, the Dana White's Contender Series, coming back, fighting for Eternal MMA, getting the win against Blair Bratag, you'd be assuming in your mind that a win in Sydney on the eve of having the UFC in Sydney here themselves, that this puts you back firmly in the scope of the UFC. But just on that, I mean, there's some different things happening here. The middleweight division here in Australia is certainly heating up. On the same card that you fought on and won against Blair, we had Darcy Vendy winning against John Martin Fraser for the middleweight title there as well. So, look, without looking too far past your opponent here, there's some different things that are options for you, certainly, whether it's a UFC calling up. But, I mean, if that call doesn't immediately come, in the aftermath of you getting a win at Eternal 92, have you sort of got maybe one eye on the side of what's happening now between Darcy Vendy and Matt Myers? Because they're, of course, facing off for the middleweight title in a couple of cards after you. Are you assessing all options?
Of course. Always looking at all options, just like I did with this one. Option A doesn't happen, then option B, 100%.
I like it, man. Any thoughts just on that matchup, Darcy Vendy and Matt Myers at all?
Yeah, it's a great matchup. I'll be watching it closely. Two really good fighters. I don't know too much about Matt. I know he's fought my teammate Kevin Jusay, and he was scheduled to fight my teammate Brogan. But I know Darcy quite well, like through the connection with like Ben Johnson and TFC, and I think it's going to be a really good fight. Like a finish, maybe not, but both guys are like really good at finishing each other. But that's like MMA maths. When two guys are finishers and they come together, it usually ends up being like quite a drawn out, long fight. But two dudes who are like experienced strikers and good wrestlers as well. So could see it playing out on the feet for 5 rounds.
No, just in general, finally, after so many years, we've got the middleweight division here in Australia at large heating up, and you're a big part of that now, coming over and fighting for Eternal MMA. It seemed like we only kind of had a couple of contenders here now. Now, all of a sudden, we got some up-and-comers. We got some established guys like yourself getting thrown into the mix. Very exciting time, especially for someone like you who's on the cusp of sort of going to that next level. Just talking about your opponent there as well, Alfred Stoddart, of course, your next opponent that you're fighting at Eternal 92. And speaking of this fight with Darcy Vendy and Matt Myers, something caught my attention on an Instagram post for that particular fight announcement. Someone suggested, hey, does Alfred Stoddart get the winner of this fight? He had a response saying, no, I'm good. I want to go to the big show. That's my goal this year. I don't know if you saw this or whether you care, but any thoughts on that? Is that something that you think that, look, I don't know if Alfred's looking at you as the stepping stone. He thinks that's sort of all it takes to kind of get to the next point. Did you see this post at all?
No, I didn't see that post. I'm one of those guys who just
head down.
Doesn't really read too much. Yeah, it doesn't really read too much into the social media. But to be honest, like I respect that. Like, yeah, it's a hard sport, you know. Everyone who does this sport usually has a dream of being in the UFC, and I'm not going to say like, oh no, he's not going to make it after he beats me. Who knows? Who knows? Maybe he does make it after he beats me. Maybe I beat him and then I make it. It can go either way. But I mean, I can't hate on a guy who's trying to make the UFC just like I am.
No, fair play, man. And I mean, just focus on yourself for one last one before I let you go. I mean, like we said, given where you're at this point in your career, having competed on Dana White's Contender Series, amassing a very solid record that you have now of 10-3, I believe, coming in against this big-time fight against Alfred Stoddart, everything on the line, the UFC in town. Is the focus on this fight with Alfred, is it just sort of solely getting the win and getting another win under your belt, or do you feel like there's kind of more at stake here and you need to make another big statement? You made a big statement in your last fight. Do you feel the pressure to kind of go one better, or is it just a matter of like, let's just get the wins under our belt and keep going? What's sort of in your mind when you vision how you kind of get the job done for this one?
Not just only for this fight. For every fight that I have, I think a lot about this quote that I heard from Nick Diaz many, many years ago. He said, if you don't finish a fight, you lose a fight. And all the fights that I've won, all finishes. And so I'm always trying to get the finish. It's not so much that I want to get the win under my belt or I want it to be an impressive fight. For myself, I like to know that I won the fight. And by winning a fight, in my mind, it's only by finishing the fight.
I love that mentality, man. Well, it all goes down on February 8th for Eternal 92. The people's main event, Cam Rowston versus Alfred Stoddart on the main card. on the eve of the UFC being in town. The stakes could not be sort of higher for this one. We're 24 days out, something like that. Make sure you get your tickets at eternalmma.com. If you're not going there live and in person, you can, of course, tune in live and exclusive on UFC Fight Pass. What an absolute banger of a card this is going to be. Can't wait to see what goes down. Huge stakes in the middleweight division. And thank you very much for your time, man. I know, obviously, you're in the middle of training today, training this morning and training this afternoon. So fantastic to have a chat to you and get some insight ahead of what is the next big fight in your career. So all the best coming up on February 8th, and we'll see you on the other side, man. Thanks again for your time.
Thanks, Luke.